Hello, thank you, and welcome to today's webinar. Before we start, I just wanted to begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we all meet today and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I also want to extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people here with us today. Okay, so for today's webinar, just a little bit of housekeeping first. The session, as I mentioned, is recorded. We do that because we like to have a copy of it after and send a copy to people who registered but cannot attend, or if you want to rewatch. So that'll be going out at some point in the following week or so after the session. Questions, we strongly encourage questions. Please use the chat or the Q&A function within the webinar to submit your questions. We'll make some time at the end of the session to go through those questions. But obviously, if we run out of time, we want to respect your time, and you may not have all the time in the world. We will, at the very least, compile all those questions and provide a written response to those questions as part of our follow-up after the webinar as well. I've got some colleagues on the webinar with me who are going to help with the Q&A at the end of the presentation. So thank you for those. And then, like I said, after the session, we'll be sending out a link to the webpage, which will include a recording of the session and then a summary document of the points raised, as well as written answers to all of the questions that we go through. So before we get stuck in, just a little bit about MyIntegra. So obviously, NDIS Plan Manager. I just wanted to give you a quick update on a feature to do with our invoice payment process. Some of you may not be aware, but we're currently paying quicker than we've ever been able to pay before, as much as 24 hours for qualifying invoices. But central to that is also a focus on accuracy and fraud controls. So, for example, in the last month, we identified 11 significant cases which we managed to stop, and has become a huge part of our focus and the work that we're doing as an intermediary. The benefit of all this to you, obviously, is that it can help free you up from the administrative burden, and as well as combined with the portal that we have, means that you're able to focus on the things that you need to focus on. So with all that in mind, we would obviously love the opportunity to support you and your participants. Please let us know if there's anything that we can do to help support your participants, or have MyIntegra given as an opportunity, as an option for them as a plan manager for any referrals. So we have a wide range of ways for you to contact us as well, as listed here, QR code to our website there. Also online on the website, we've got web chat as well. So that just quick detour onto the presentation for today. Our speaker is Adam Sargent, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Sana Living and a very knowledgeable person on all things SDA. So thank you very much, Adam, for joining us today. We originally had one of Adam's colleagues scheduled to do the presentation, but Adam has very kindly stepped in at the last minute. So I'll leave it there. What we're going to do is I'll hand over to Adam to go through his slides. Please put your questions as you go through the Q&A and the chat feature. We'll make some time to go through those at the end. And Adam, I will hand over to you. I'll drive the webinar. Just let me know if you need any particular slides.
No, thanks, Rob. That's great. Good morning, everyone. Yes, my name's Adam. I'm from Sana Living. So we are a developer and owner of specialist disability accommodation. We, in addition to being a registered SDA provider of the dwellings as well, so we kind of do a bit of everything, so we see it from beginning to end. Now, SDA is a very large topic, so today we'll go through some of the key elements, providing some takeaways that should assist with any participant conversations on the topic. Including basic determination of eligibility, the different types of SDA and the journey to achieve approval. Rob, I just wanted to check, have you got the most recent slides there?
Yeah, these were just from earlier today after we emailed, yeah.
Okay, we'll see. My contents page is a little bit different, so we'll see how we go.
Okay.
All right, just the next one, thank you. So, look, understanding SDA. SDA describes the physical accommodation and does not incorporate the supports received in any dwelling. The SDA housing has been specifically designed to modify or suit the needs of people who have an extreme functional impairment or very high support needs. It's anticipated by the NDIA that approximately 30,000 people are eligible for SDA nationally and may ultimately reside in SDA. Now, there are a range of dwelling types that SDA can exist as. These are apartments, villas or townhouses for 2 or 3 people. Villas or townhouses for a range of number of people, 2 or 3, 1, 2 or 3, houses for 2 or 3 people, or group homes of 4 or 5 people. And within those, we have a number of different design categories, and these essentially talk about the levels of accessibility within each of these settings. So improvability are mostly suited participants with a sensory, intellectual or cognitive impairment. Now, these are fairly easy to move around in. The doorways and handles and switches are often easy to see. It's also just easy to see from one room to the next, so they're often open planned. And this would be the lowest level of general physical accessibility in the SDA standard. The next category is robust, which is a very complex category, and it's our belief that robust really needs to be developed with the participant in mind, because one participant's condition might be very different to another's, and building a generic home is very difficult in this category. So as the name suggests, it's a very strong home, and these homes are suited to participants who sometimes act in a way that's not safe for them or for the people around them. The walls and windows and other features in a robust home can't be broken easily. They have good soundproofing so that sounds coming from outside don't upset the residents, and any sound or noise coming from inside doesn't upset the neighbours. All the doors and windows are secure, and there'll also be a safe place to retreat if the residents or on-site staff are feeling unsafe. This is called a breakout room. The next is the fully accessible category. This is where we start getting into the physical accessibility of a home, and it will start to look and feel a little bit different to standard housing or housing that might be the basic level of accessibility, like a retirement or nursing home type arrangement. So fully accessible designed have a significant physical disability, the participants residing here. Most often people who are eligible use a wheelchair to get around some or all of the time. You're not seeing these steps in any of the homes. The doorways are wide enough for a wheelchair, and there's ample turning spaces within the dwelling. The bathroom is designed in a way which provides accessibility from both a seated and standing position, and the kitchen is also designed to allow for this as well. Then we get into the highest level of design category, and that's high physical support. And this has all the same physical attributes of a fully accessible home, plus the addition of emergency backup power. And this is important for anyone that could be on a ventilator. So it's essentially a backup for the backup power that they would already have in the device. The ceiling has been engineered to be strong enough to support a ceiling hoist in the bedroom, so that it can easily be installed when someone moves in. And it also has a base level of assistive technology, so that there can be communication between themselves and any carers on site, and allow them to control lighting, air conditioning, and other features throughout the home, including using their voice to control, which is pretty cool to see in practice. Most people in a fully accessible home would be an electric wheelchair user, and they would often need a hoist to qualify for this category. They also might need a significant amount of one-to-one supports every day. Now, SDA eligibility criteria, and now this is something that we can only give advice on because we don't make the decisions, but there are criteria that need to be met. And this can be useful when having conversations with any of your clients to help sort of guide the process with them. So to qualify for SDA, as I mentioned before, you must have an extreme functional impairment or very high support needs, or both. Now, in addition to this, the NDIA will assess whether, or they need to see evidence that mainstream housing could not meet the needs of the participant, or some minor home modifications in the dwelling they reside couldn't meet those needs. Now, with standard housing, the walls are where the walls are. You can't really move them easily. So hallway width, design of bathrooms, kitchens are all things that the reasons the SDA was designed, because there is a minimum level of clearances, and most houses don't have that inherently. In someone's plan, if they are successful, they'll receive funding for a level of accessibility, which is the previous slide, and that will be the high physical support, fully accessible, robust, which is missing off this slide, and improved livability. So those 4 categories which we spoke of. They'll either then receive funding for a shared living arrangement or a sole living arrangement. In the assessment and justification for SDA, it will be assessed whether they can live in close proximity to others if sharing, and compatible with other housemates. And if it's a single occupancy setting, it will be determined whether they'll be a suitable neighbour for others living with a disability. Next slide, if you can. Thanks, Rob. So that's a very quick overview of the criteria for SDA and the different categories. I thought it'd be useful to show some slides of what that actually looks like in practice in a finished product. So here you have on the left a kitchen in a high physical support, we call it HPS for short, in one of the homes that we have under operations. So you can see here the kitchen's been designed with ample clearance for a wheelchair, a knee clearance under the sink hot plate. There's also an adjustable bench, which is the section with the black fascia there, and that's electronic, pushing a button, go up and down to a range of heights. The dishwasher drawer is a pull-out drawer, so it can be viewed from above rather than a standard door that swings down. And there's a side opening oven, which is just out of view there to enable someone to approach the oven fairly closely and use it independently if they have the capacity. On the right there is one of our bathrooms, and I've got to say some of the features that we put in the homes that we do aren't necessarily required. They're extras because we think they're just good to have, but this displays all the minimum requirements, which you can see there: a specific height of the tap to run the shower, and a 2-metre shower hose that it can assist in use if someone uses a shower trolley or a carer needs to be particularly mobile when assisting with showering. There is ample clearance under the vanity for wheelchair. We put an angled mirror there so that it's actually pointing towards the person instead of sort of the upper part of their head, and flick mixer taps, which are compliant as well. The precision required in tiling one of these bathrooms is unbelievable, and it's every builder's nightmare. It has to be absolutely perfect, as opposed to a regular home, which has a lot more leniency in the provisions there. Next slide, thanks. You can see here that this is a participant using some of the assistive technology in the home. This will have apps to control the lights, the blinds. They can control the air conditioner from this. They could call the carers. There's also Alexa devices to be able to do all those functions as well. And the house has to have a base level of this wiring and provisions. We tend to provide it because assistive technology funding doesn't tend to go that far, and if someone has to fund an automated blind and some sort of device that might assist them in using their voice, it'll get used up pretty quickly. So we tend to include these things at the beginning, and any additional requirements would be funded by their funding themselves. The right one is one of our entries. This is an automated door. If that participant was to look to the left on the screen, there's a facial recognition intercom, and we program the faces of the tenants only in this, and so they can turn up to the porch, look to the intercom, and the door will open for them. Everyone else has to use a PIN number or use the intercom. And to date, we haven't had anyone lose their keys, so it's actually a really good feature for everyone. And we find it's one of the best things for people if they don't have the upper limb control to be able to use a key. Then this is often the first time they've been able to let themselves into their own property, which is pretty rewarding for everyone that's on site for a handover. Next slide, thanks. So every SDA provider or owner should set themselves a goal of looking for innovation, and this has to be done within the design standard constraints and also the funding that is applied to homes, which is a fixed revenue for any developer or owner. So within those constraints, we always look to develop homes that are a little different or maybe offer an increased level of independence or privacy. So the home to the left here is two homes side by side, and they're mirrored on a reasonably large block, and they're for two participants. The front room is a carer's room, which on both homes, which can have overnight support, and the two homes can function and they can assist. If someone needs a 2 assist or a 3 assist, the carers can easily be called to next door and assist, but the participants get their own space with just one other person. And I guess this is a sign of innovation in terms of the easiest option would be to build a 4-bedroom home on this lot, but that doesn't really offer anything new in the space, and the level of independence and privacy that these homes offer is vastly superior. On the right here, we have an image of one of our bedrooms showing the bathroom through that doorway, and also a courtyard, private courtyard for that participant on the left. One of the things that we developed early on was creating a full height doorway between the bathroom and the ensuite. So if someone received funding for a recess track or a track that can go all the way into the bathroom because they are either a shower trolley user or it's not practical for them to transfer in the bedroom, if the NDIA is happy to fund that, there's very minimal structural changes that are required to make that possible in this setting. It's just trimming the door down, putting some scribes at the side of the track, and then they're away. So we find that's a much better approach. There is a door that's fully open there and it is full height. So it's a lot more work to do this, but I think in the end it really gives a really good outcome and lowers the cost of the install of any sort of hoist in the future. Next slide, thank you. Did we miss one there? There might have been one of a villa. Might have disappeared.
Yeah, so I think we missed that one.
I'll just speak to it. There's other settings that that can offer an innovative approach, which are a series of villas on one site, and one of the villas might have a OOA or a carer's office where within one of the dwellings where they can be based, and if required, everyone can subscribe to a shared on-site support model. So it's like a mini concierge on site there, but it allows for a really efficient model of support, and it can be on call using the intercom. I'm sure the NDIA would be very keen on this being in play. If we find people that don't need around-the-clock support, but they would really benefit from being able to call in the case of emergency or a fall or just for ad hoc services, then that is the dwelling is designed, or the setting is designed to support that if need be. Right, so look, choice of support providers. This slide sort of outlines what we believe the best practice method of facilitating choice of a support provider in a shared setting. This can also be in an apartment setting where everyone lives independently, but they need to choose a concierge or an SOS provider. And you might have seen some SOS line items coming into people's plans recently, which is a singular line that outlines what the support provider that's allocated for a site can draw down on to provide ad hoc supports to everyone in that setting. So this process is extremely time consuming and detailed, and I won't go through every single step, but we feel it's a really important process to support everyone's choice and control and ensure that we have reduced turnover of supports because the right decisions haven't been made up front and the right support providers haven't been presented and vetted. So we would offer expressions of interest submissions for support providers where the participants in a home or an apartment setting don't have a singular view on who that support provider might be, or they are not familiar with any because they've come out of a residential care facility and they're not familiar with any other providers. And so a range of providers will submit submissions. The tenancy team and exec team will review those submissions, and we would shortlist those depending on their level of experience, their relevant insurances, any conflict of interest, before shortlisting these to the participants. We then usually set up a morning tea where the shortlisted, often 3, maybe 4 support providers can come and present to the participants, and they will put forward how they work and sort of their values, and see if this aligns, and then the participants vote on the preferred support provider. And then the support provider is allocated that site, and they agree on a term in which everyone is working together to have a great model of support, and we have a collaboration agreement then with the support provider. So it's the participant's choice in this situation, and it should be in all situations, of who that provider is, and we're still there to hear any concerns or to ensure that the support provider is meeting their obligations, or else we step in and assist the participants in changing that if need be. Next slide, thanks. Oh, there's the slide that's appeared that we spoke of before. So that's a set of villas that on the left there, where we have 3 villas to the rear of this site, and it is quite a large site. And then this one has facial recognition at the gate, so it's very secure. And the front home's a 2-resident home, and in that has an OOA, or an on-site overnight assistance room for carers to be based. And if need be, they can help service the needs of everyone on site. I think what should be evident is we always try to aim for settings that do not look like institutions, and we really try and make them blend into the neighbourhood and hopefully be one of the nicest houses in the street. But we really don't have. We try and avoid open car parks at the front where vans are often parked. We have clean closed garages. It's very easy to spot a traditional group home where there's vans all over the place, and we really aim to make sure these blend into the streetscape and do not give any indication they're anything other than just nice residential homes, in good suburbs. Next slide. Thanks. Okay, so this is a slide that we prepared to help assist in people understanding their journey towards SDA, and you can be provided with a copy. It's on our website as well, but you'll have this as part of the slides. This is by no means incorporates all steps involved. You're probably aware it's a very complex and heavily scrutinised level of funding with the NDAA. And this sort of indicates a rough timeframe of between 6 and 9 months for the whole process, and that's beginning when someone identifies a housing goal in their plan. So I won't go through every single step involved here. There is a portion of this in the middle where it is submitted to the NDAA, and then that is a waiting game. Although they do have mandated timeframes to turn it around if additional information is requested, or it's rejected and appeal needs to occur, then the timeframe can be open-ended, really. But we've seen some really quick approvals come around, and we've seen some that take a lot longer. At the very beginning of the process, the writing of the application and the functional capacity assessment is a really important part of that process, and it's important that is written with lots of detail and lots of justification for the type of housing and the category that someone is seeking, or else appeals just become time-consuming, costly as well. So it's really best to put your best foot forward at the beginning, and hopefully the outcome that's being requested is granted. Once all this is approved, then the SIL quote is approved. and hopefully that matches the setting in which someone is going into, and then usually once that's been confirmed, a lease is signed with the SDA provider and they can move in. Often they've identified the property that they want, what they're aiming for, around the time that they're thinking of applying, and that often works well. If it's in construction, that someone can apply and say, look, as long as I get the right funding, I'd love to put my name against that. And most SDA providers would be happy to have those conversations early on, and so that someone can make some forward planning. Next slide, thanks. So now, when choosing an SDA provider, just some important things that you might want to assist any clients in asking. Some practical questions are, who's responsible for the maintenance or gardening? Can I have pets in the property? It's a very common question that we get, and we're more than open to having pets as long as everyone in the house agrees. The lease and the RTA, what type of format is it? What sort of lease agreement is it? The length of time and the conditions around it. The rental contribution, which is outside of the SDA payments. This is the reasonable rent contribution by the tenant. That is set by the NDIA, just ensuring that is in line with what the NDIA have dictated. Furniture is a really interesting one. Is furniture supplied by the SDA provider, or sometimes the support provider is happy to supply some? Although this is the tenant's home, the SIL provider is really a guest in there. So it is very different to the SIL homes of old, where the support provider and the accommodation provider are essentially one and the same. This is a separate model of delivery. For our settings, we supply and we furnish the settings that are shared. We feel it's a real barrier to enter a property if you've got one person moving in who doesn't have a couch, one person brings their own couch, some person brings a fridge. What if someone moves out? I'm sure everyone has lived in a share. It becomes problematic, and we just think it's something that people shouldn't have to worry about. So we would furnish the common areas in any sort of shared setting. That's 2, 3, 4. We don't do 5-bedroom homes. Independent settings. Most people have their own equipment because they've lived independently for a while, so we don't furnish any of the single occupancy settings for that reason. And asking a support SDA provider what the separation of services is. Are they just a housing provider? Are they an SDA provider? And are they independent supports that can be enlisted? Or are they under the same entity structure? Is there separation at all? And what sort of choice do they have around either of those services? That was the last slide for me.
Awesome, Adam. Thank you so much for that. I was actually learning a lot better. I appreciate it. I always appreciate you coming back on so I didn't have to improvise my way through a couple of slides there at the end. So that would have been good. That's fantastic. I'll just say here, if people have any questions or comments, experiences that they want to share, please put them in the comments box now. While I'm giving people a chance to do that, we have about 15 minutes left or so. Have you got any common questions that you get, Adam? Is there a particularly common question that you get that you would want to kind of hit off now that may be relevant to everyone on the call?
Yes, there is. One of the most common ones is what trends are we seeing with SDA outcomes, right. And support coordinators would see it at the coalface as well. I guess we would see, because we're having direct conversations with participants, because they often start conversations with us and then involve the support coordinator and then any of their support networks. But in terms of what the agency is tending to approve and put in someone's plan, we're seeing 3 resident outcomes as the vast majority. And that also aligns with, I guess, the agency's view of a 3-to-1 support ratio, which is common and probably fairly efficient. And they are trying, I guess they would like that to be fitting with most people's situation. And so that's a participant sharing with 2 others. So it's a house situation, could be a villa, but unlikely. Single resident outcomes are rare. They really have to be justified very, very well in the application. good supporting evidence. They're often the result of an appeal and commonly an AAT appeal. And I'll just say on the AAT appeals, these often don't go to a hearing. They're often settled prior to it getting to AAT, but it's unfortunate that it has to go to that level of appeal to get a result. But that is the pattern that we tend to see.
Okay, interesting. I've seen we've had a few questions come through. I was just going to ask you quickly as well. I know you operate in a couple of states, but also just to clarify, or just from your understanding, differences, what are the different, not what are all the differences, but am I right in saying that there are differences in states that people need to consider? Our audience here are from throughout Australia, so I just wanted to ask you about that.
Not from a funding point of view. There's definite development considerations depending on which state you're in. New South Wales, Victoria, property prices very high, so locations would be not compromised, but they just have to be a different level of acceptance, I suppose. Apartments might be more common in those states and Queensland as well because of the familiarity of the general population with apartments. Apartments aren't hugely accepted in Perth on the general population, and therefore participants are happy to look at them, but it's quite new because apartment living in Perth is not particularly, it's not as common as houses. Adelaide would be the same as that. I would generalise. So no, there's no real differences in the patterns that we're seeing in terms of funding. It's probably more what's on offer, state to state.
Okay, great. Cool. Okay, Johnny, are you able to come off mute and just kind of go through some of the questions that we've had? I've seen a couple of juicy ones, so I want to. We've got about 10 minutes left to get through some of these.
Yeah. Hi, Rob. I'm going to be asking the questions for Johnny.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So we have quite a few. The first one from Mary. Can you recommend some providers who can write up the report for the participants to be SDA approved?
Yes, we could. We could potentially assist with that. We're probably happy to take direct contact for that if need be, and we would always provide a range, and because we can't necessarily recommend. We're not involved in the writing process, but we have had some good experiences. So we do often say here are the people who have some success in doing reports or some experience, but we would always give a more than one recommendation. Right. So happy to be, if someone wants to reach out to us directly, we can let them know, but it'd be location specific because often they need direct contact with the clients.
Right, and we've got the email address on screen there, so please make a note of that. And Greta, next one.
Yep. And what is the usual rent contribution from Julie?
So the rent contribution from the tenant is specified by the NDIA, and the reason rent contribution is 25% of the DSP. It's 25% of the support supplement, and it's 100% of the Commonwealth rent assistance. And those rates are set with NDA, whether someone receives it or not, because you may have someone that is gainfully employed, it doesn't receive any of those benefits, and so the amount is set based on the maximum rates that occur. And they're adjusted twice a year. We've got one in about 7 days, 20th of March, 20th of September, and the rent just follows those amounts set by Services Australia. So currently it's $4.55, 20 cents or so per fortnight. So roughly, sort of $2.27 or so a week.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
And from Mary, we have, can a participant live in an SDA with their partner and child when only one of the people have an NDIS plan?
It's a great question, and it's been a very hot topic in the past few years. So there is people can apply, and the NDIS, I think the stance is that we don't fund accommodation for non-SDA participants. However, we recognise that people have the right to live with family and partners. And so if someone had an outcome that was a 3-resident outcome, that's obviously not an appropriate setting for them and their family to live with 2 other people who are non-related. So if they're successful in their appeal, then the participant would have something called Appendix H applied, which means that although their approval is for 3-bed or 3-resident house funding, the NDIA would apply, say, a 1-resident villa funding, so that they can then go to an SDA provider and say, I've got 3-resident funding, but the NDIS has said I can have 1-resident villa funding, and they apply to my plan, and that means I can live in a single occupancy setting, and hopefully it's a spare bedroom if there's more than one other family member, and they can then reside with their family. It's tied to that setting though, and it's also tied to the family living with them. So if that changes, it reverts back to the other funding level. So it's not a clear process, but there is provisions for sharing with families. If the SDA provider wants to give a 3-resident home to someone with and just take the one amount of 3-resident funding, then that's up to them. So yes, it can exist. It's tough to make it work though for the SDA provider, but yes, no, there are options. Definitely, we have a number of families living in our properties, and it's a great outcome for them.
Good question. Greta?
Another one. We have Claire's asking if you can tell us about unplanned shared supports and what those supports are meant to look like in an SDA.
Unplanned shared supports. So the shared on-site supports that we sort of described earlier, where it's on call and it might be a line item in the plan, I assume. I guess there's a formal method of delivering shared on-site supports, which is unplanned, and then in an apartment it would be, so say we've got apartment settings with 10 apartments, and each of the tenants, they're voted on a shared on-site support provider, and they're based in the building still, and they provide on-call or unplanned supports. And I think the amount is 70-something thousand that's applied in their plan, and that goes directly to the shared on-site support provider times 10, and that's calculated to allow them to provide 24-hour support of one staff member for 365 days a year. I think that's the calculation they've used. So it will allow one staff member, one care provider, to be on site at all times. And there's a limit about, you can't use more than 2 hours a day each person of that support. That's kind of the rule of thumb. So it has to be an appropriate use of that setting. But yeah, that's kind of how it works. For smaller settings, you have to work out whether it's possible to do it 24 hours a day with that level of funding, because it's only ever 70-something thousand times whatever the number of people are. So again, we facilitate those conversations, but that's really a participant support provider service agreement. We just help facilitate the arrangement of that model of support.
Thanks.
We have another one. Is there a minimum size block of land to build SDA approved dwelling?
There isn't, and we can only speak for what we do. We tend to put a lot more contingency in our designs, because the minimum hallway width is 1.2 metres, and a large wheelchair is going to take up the majority of that. So our hallway is 1.8 metres wide, sometimes 2 metres wide. So we don't build to the minimum standards. So it is difficult. We need 750 square metres to build one 3-bedroom home. Others could probably do it on 400. So no, that's a very, this is the other question is, does everyone get their own bathroom? You're not required to. We feel it's a human right to be able to have your own bathroom. So our homes are just bigger through having those things. So you could do the bare minimum and do it 350, 400 square metres. It wouldn't be good though. But so it's a very difficult question to ask. Sorry.
And then Anna has asked, who is responsible for paying for property damage, the SDA provider or participants?
Yeah. So damage that is just wear and tear for a wheelchair user. Now, wear and tear for a normal property that you might rent is very different to someone that's in a wheelchair. So the SDA funding has allowed for reactive maintenance, and so if someone's room needs repainting after they have moved out, and it's non-intentional damage, then the SDA provider needs to cover that, and they should be. So maintenance like that is fine. If something is broken because they haven't treated it well, then we have a conversation around, is that something that is fair for the SDA provider to cover? We cover the gardening and everything as well, and the internet, but that's not the same for every provider. You can charge that to the house, and it comes out of a board payment or something that the supervisor might run. So I can't speak for everyone, but that's what we do. Yeah.
All right, we've got a few minutes left, so let's see how many more we can get through, Greta. Thank you.
Okay. What is an example of how much funding is needed for an SDA SAL funding in an NDIS plan?
Well, there's there's a table, so it's not a variable amount. It's a set amount depending on the dwelling type, depending on the design category, and depending on the location and whether it's got sprinklers or not. So so these can range from a $30,000 a year funding amount for sort of the lowest level of accessibility, and the up to 120 per year for an apartment, or 115. So it's varied. And some, say New South Wales, with really high location factors, because the agency recognises that it's really expensive to build dwellings in central Sydney, that you might get an uplift of 80% on those rates as well. So it's regional, but really it's a table within the NDIA pricing guide that will let you know what those funding amounts are. But they can range from what I said, 30,000 to 120.
Yeah, we'll link to that as part of the follow-up stuff that we send out.
Okay, we probably have time for one more. So most SDA providers do not accept clients who have improved livability funding, as that is the lowest level of funding. So what can be done in this space for these clients?
Well, interestingly, it was the lowest level of funding. It's now very close to being uniform with the other levels of funding. So July last year, there was a pricing review for SDA. And we can now take improved livability clients with improved livability funding in our high physical support homes, because the difference between the two is there's still a difference, but it's not as big as it was before. It used to be like a third or a quarter of what that was. It's now much closer, which is great. It really opens up the avenues and the options for people looking for SDA, because improved livability wasn't being developed at a great amount. But we've got improved livability clients in apartments, because the funding it's been lifted up, and they wanted to align these a lot more with each other rather than making such a big difference between them. So I guess that hopefully that answers your question, but the gap isn't as big anymore. And if someone has funding and hasn't been adjusted, the agency should adjust it to the new rates, and then it can really broaden their options. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Greta, and thank you, Adam, and thank you to everyone here for those questions. I thought there were excellent questions there, and Adam, really good answers. I appreciate that. For those of you who joined late, we have recorded the session. We will share that recording to everyone. For those of you who asked questions that haven't been answered, we will supply written answers to that as part of the follow-up we do in the next week or so. If you think of anything else, please let us know in terms of questions for this. And just generally, a thank you for everyone for attending, particularly Adam, obviously, for helping to present today. If anyone has ideas for future webinar topics and that type of stuff, please let us know, and we'd love to hear from you. Any feedback or stuff like that, we would love to get from you and respond accordingly. So yeah, I would just like to thank everyone for attending. We'll be doing more of these, so please keep your eye out for the next ones in the future. Any ideas about the type of content you'd like to see more about, please let us know. So we'll leave it there. We'll send out the follow-up information as soon as possible. And final thank you to Adam. Appreciate your time, everybody. We'll speak to you next time. Thank you.